The eyes in my basement. It started when I was looking for old boxes in the basement and noticed a faint glow coming from the corner, just behind the furnace, something small yet deliberate. I froze, thinking it might be a reflection from a pipe or leftover wiring, but the glow pulsed softly, like tiny eyes observing me from the shadows. The basement is usually cold and quiet, but that night it felt alive, every creak amplified, every whisper of air, carrying a strange presence I couldn't explain. I stepped closer, flashlight in hand, shining across the concrete floor. Nothing moved except the faint, rhythmic glimmer that now felt almost sentient. The glow became clearer. 2 small points, deep red, staring at me from behind the stack of old cardboard boxes in the far corner. I thought I was imagining it. A trick of light, my mind playing games in the dim basement, but the points didn't shift randomly. They tracked me. I held my breath, trying not to move. The glow pulsed brighter, and I could swear a tiny shadow stretched toward me across the concrete. A scraping sound followed, something small, deliberate, moving over the floor toward the steps. It was too precise to be a rodent or falling debris. I knelt to look behind the boxes, flashlight trembling, and that's when I saw them. 2 tiny porcelain eyes, unnaturally large for a doll-shaped figure crouched on the floor. Its body was grotesque, thin limbs bent impossibly, skin cracked and discolored, and its head turned slowly to face me, tilting unnaturally as though studying my every movement. I stumbled back, heart racing. My mind told me to run, but the presence in the basement seemed to expand, filling the room with an almost unbearable tension. The figure didn't move further, but I could feel its awareness pressing toward me, calculating, patient, waiting for me to make the next move. I turned off my flashlight briefly, hoping it would remain still, but the eyes glowed brighter in the darkness, pulsating rhythmically as if responding to the absence of light. I tried speaking, whispering, asking if anyone was there, and the glow blinked once, sharp and deliberate, almost like a signal acknowledging my voice. Every instinct told me to leave immediately, but curiosity pinned me to the spot, staring as the small figure shifted its head, exploring the space around it. It moved closer, impossibly fast, its limbs stretching unnaturally across the floor, stopping just inches from my shoes, its gaze unblinking, cold, and terrifyingly intelligent. I backed away slowly, climbing the steps, but every movement seemed to excite it, making the glowing eyes pulse faster, almost like a heartbeat in the dark. Once I reached the top of the stairs, I slammed the basement door, pressing my back against it, listening to the soft, deliberate scratching behind the wooden panels. I waited until morning. The glow had vanished, the basement silent except for ordinary creaks and the hum of the furnace, but I knew it hadn't truly left. Over the next few nights, I avoided the basement entirely, but small scratches continued, faint whispers of movement echoing behind the walls in ways I couldn't explain. I set up a small night vision camera at the basement door. The next morning, I reviewed the footage, and the eyes appeared at the corner again. No body was visible, just 2 glowing points, blinking in the dark, as if they had detached from the doll-like figure and existed independently. The scratches continued, synchronized with the pulsing glow, moving along the floor and walls as if the room itself had been animated by some malevolent intelligence. I couldn't sleep properly. Every creak upstairs made me flinch. Every shadow seemed to pulse with life, waiting for me to descend once more into the basement. I began leaving a small nightlight on at the stairway. The eyes didn't disappear, but appeared to hover just beyond the light's reach, persistent, unyielding. Sometimes I swore I heard breathing in the basement air, faint, deliberate, synchronized with the pulsing of the glowing eyes, as if the figure was alive in ways impossible to understand. I considered moving, abandoning the house entirely, but even that didn't feel safe. The intelligence in those eyes seemed capable of tracking, patient, waiting beyond physical boundaries. The basement remains untouched most days. I don't enter. But at night, the faint glow returns, and I know the figure is still there, observing, calculating, patient, waiting for my next descent. Even now, I feel it through the walls. Small, patient, grotesque, intelligent, and entirely aware that I am watching it as much as it watches me. The doll in my neighbor's window. It started when I noticed something strange behind the glass of my neighbor's living room window. A shape that didn't belong. A small, grotesque doll staring straight at the street. Its head was too large for its body. Glassy eyes reflecting the streetlight. Limbs unnaturally bent. Frozen in a pose that made my stomach twist instantly. I told myself it was just a toy, placed oddly by a child. But no children lived there, and the house seemed empty most days. Every night around midnight, the doll appeared in the same window, always turned slightly toward my house, as if watching my bedroom from across the street. One night I walked closer, trying to see if it was a reflection, a trick of light, or some decoration I hadn't noticed before. The closer I got, the more I noticed its details. Cracks in the porcelain face, tiny teeth visible in a subtle grin, something clearly off. Its eyes seemed to move just slightly, following my shadow as I passed the sidewalk. A minute, precise shift that made me stumble back. I considered telling myself I was imagining things, but my heart pounded, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed with intent. The following night, I tried filming from my window. The doll stayed still at first, but once my phone camera focused, its head tilted, ever so slightly, directly at me. I zoomed in carefully, but the reflection of the glass made the eyes glint unnaturally, as though the lens had awakened it somehow. I stepped away from the window, shaking, and the moment I did, the doll's arms shifted. One bent unnaturally at the elbow, pointing in my direction. I froze. The street was quiet. The house dark, and yet the doll remained, unnervingly still except for that impossible adjustment, deliberate and precise. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the doll's warped grin, flashing in the corner of my mind, like it had etched itself into memory. The next night, I set up a small camera outside, hoping to catch whoever or whatever moved the doll. When I reviewed the footage the next morning, the doll was gone from the window for a few seconds. Then it appeared again, tilted slightly toward the camera. No human hand ever entered the frame. No sound, no footsteps, nothing. Only the doll shifting in impossible ways, as if alive. I tried to warn myself it was some prank, a clever placement, but the angles didn't make sense. The doll moved too fast, too precise, with a deliberate awareness. A week later, I noticed another detail. The doll's head was no longer straight. It was slightly cocked, like it was listening, reacting to my presence. Sometimes I swore it smiled wider when I passed the window, subtle, almost imperceptible, but enough to make the hair on my arms stand on end. I started avoiding that side of the street at night, taking longer routes home, but even during the day, I felt eyes on me whenever I walked past. Then one night, my bedroom window faced the doll directly. I hadn't realized until I saw it tilt its head at the exact moment I glanced outside. I backed away slowly. Its gaze seemed to linger, even when I ducked behind the curtain, like it knew where I had been looking. I considered leaving a note, knocking on the door, asking why the doll was there, but fear rooted me in place. The house was silent, empty, foreboding. The next night, I watched from my window as the doll disappeared entirely. A relief, brief, fleeting, until I noticed a smaller doll in the corner of the room, half hidden. This one was different. Its eyes were smaller, sharper, almost glinting with an unnatural awareness, angled slightly toward my window, just like the first. I panicked, knowing now the house wasn't empty. Something lived in that room, or moved the dolls, and it was aware of me. The dolls seemed to communicate silently, shifting positions between them, as if orchestrating some ritual that I was forbidden to witness fully. The next day, I checked the front yard. No footprints, no signs of life, but my neighbor's curtains were drawn unusually tight, hiding the living room completely. I couldn't stop thinking about the dolls, how their grotesque faces seemed personalized, like they recognized me, like they were waiting for me to look again. At night, I hear faint scratching against the window pane, soft, deliberate, like tiny fingernails tracing the glass from inside that dark room. And every night, when the street is quiet and the wind blows just right, I can feel those glass eyes, warped and impossible, staring straight at me, watching, waiting. The man who watches from the alley, I first noticed him one rainy night, standing motionless in the alley behind my apartment building, just beyond the dim light of the flickering street lamp. At first, I thought it was a drunk passerby or someone waiting for a friend, but the posture was too precise, too deliberate, completely still. The next night, he appeared again at the exact same spot, despite there being no apparent reason for anyone to linger there. Each night, I began noticing subtle differences. The way he tilted his head, the slow, mechanical adjustments of his long limbs. His silhouette looked almost wrong, stretched slightly, with angles that didn't match normal human proportions under the dim glow of the street lamp. I tried ignoring him, walking faster or entering my building quickly, but he seemed to anticipate my every step, appearing always just beyond the alley's shadows. One night I stopped and watched. The alley was empty at first, then his figure emerged, sliding silently from one shadow to another with uncanny precision. I tried photographing him, flashlight in hand, but the camera distorted his form, elongating his limbs further, making the figure seem even less human. I began noticing tiny details. His head was slightly too large, the angle of his shoulders unnatural, movements slow yet deliberate, like a predator measuring its prey. I considered calling the police, but he never trespassed, never spoke, never made a sound, only observed, patient and precise, making me question if he was human at all. Over time, I noticed he mirrored my movements. When I stepped toward the alley, he shifted. When I turned away, he tilted as if following the curve of my gaze. I tried confronting him once, stepping closer to the alley, flashlight raised, heart pounding, and he stepped back, but only just enough to remain within sight. The next morning, I reviewed my security camera. He wasn't visible leaving, but there were subtle distortions, shadows stretching unnaturally, and a faint flicker in the footage of something watching. Each night he returned, always at the same time, around midnight, always positioning himself just beyond the street lamp's glow, like a guardian of something I couldn't comprehend. I started documenting the pattern, the timing, and his precise movements. But the more I observed, the more I realized his behavior wasn't random, it was deliberate. One night, I heard soft, scraping sounds behind the dumpster near the alley. He wasn't moving closer, but the noise seemed synchronized with my attention. I froze, heart hammering, trying to convince myself it was the wind, a branch or some urban anomaly, but instinct screamed otherwise. I noticed his eyes glinting, faint, red in the reflection of puddles, tracking me silently as I moved along the alley edge. He seemed aware of my cameras, aware of my observations, adjusting his position slightly whenever I looked directly at him through the window. I began avoiding the alley entirely, taking longer routes home, but the feeling of being observed persisted, creeping into other corners of my apartment and street. Sometimes I swore I could see him in reflections, windows, car mirrors, puddles, always in the periphery, always watching. I considered moving far away, abandoning the street entirely, but I realized it wasn't about distance. His presence seemed tied to my attention, following without regard to physical barriers. One rainy night, I caught him on film moving almost impossibly fast across the alley, stopping perfectly still, then tilting his head to watch my window again. I began leaving lights on in my apartment, hoping to discourage him, but the glint of his eyes persisted, appearing in corners, behind shadows, aware, patient, unyielding. I tried reasoning with myself. It must be a person, a prankster, someone disturbed, but no human could move like that, pause like that, and vanish without trace. Each night, the pattern repeats. The same figure, same glinting eyes, same patient, deliberate posture, making me question whether he's human or something older, aware, unnatural. I stopped leaving windows open at night. I stopped walking the streets alone. Every movement is measured, cautious, because I know he's there, watching. And even now, every time I glance toward the alley, I feel his presence, unnervingly still, patient, grotesque, aware, waiting for my next move. The shadow outside my bedroom window. It started with a movement in the corner of my eye late one night. I thought it was a trick of the streetlight or a passing car. The street outside my window is usually quiet at night, except for occasional cars or the wind brushing through the trees. Nothing ever seemed out of place. Then I noticed it. A dark figure standing still across the road, just beyond the glow of the street lamp. Completely silent, perfectly still. I froze. At first, I thought it was a neighbor out for a late walk, but the posture didn't seem natural at all. Every night after that, I began noticing the same figure in the same spot, always at roughly the same time, appearing without explanation. It never moved closer, never crossed the street, and never left. Just standing there, watching, waiting, observing. I told myself it was probably someone else noticing my lights, or a reflection, or a prank by someone from another block. But then I noticed it mirrored my routine. When I switched on my bedroom light, the figure would pause. When I turned it off, it relaxed. I began staying awake intentionally, watching for its behavior. The shadow seemed aware of my attention, tilting its head, adjusting its stance subtly as I moved. One night, I decided to film it. I set my phone on the windowsill and waited, holding my breath as the shadow appeared at its usual spot. As I recorded, the shadow shifted slightly, leaning forward as though peering closer at my window. The street lamp behind it only amplified the silhouette. The movement was minimal, but enough to make the figure feel alive. Its presence was heavier than any ordinary human standing in that spot. I tried to tell myself it was a delivery worker, a jogger, anything normal, but the stillness, the timing, and the deliberate pauses didn't match human behavior. After a week of nightly observation, I realized it wasn't random. The shadow appeared every night at exactly 3:07 a.m., as if following a precise schedule. That realization made my stomach twist. Someone or something was deliberately timing their presence outside my window. I considered confronting it, stepping outside to ask questions, but the air grew thick whenever I even thought about moving closer to the street. Instead, I began keeping the blinds partially closed, observing without being seen. Yet the shadow seemed aware of me behind the curtain. It would adjust its posture, slowly raising its head, tilting toward my window. Sometimes it felt almost like it was smiling, though the featureless darkness offered no proof. After 2 weeks, I noticed it was no longer content standing on the sidewalk. The shadow crept closer to the edge of the yard each night. Each movement was deliberate, slow, careful, as if testing boundaries without ever crossing them completely. I began documenting the timing and position each night. The pattern was clear. Always 3:07, always near the curb, always watching my bedroom window. The first time I blinked, it seemed to anticipate it, jerking slightly in the frame, like it had seen me move without me realizing. The air outside my window grew colder as the nights went on. Even indoors, I could feel a weight pressing toward my bedroom. One night, I heard the softest tap on the window pane, almost like fingernails lightly drumming against the glass. I froze, heart racing. I waited, listening for more, but the only sound was the quiet hum of the street lamp and distant cars driving past. The shadow remained outside still, but I could feel its gaze burning into my room from across the road. I considered calling the police, explaining someone was standing outside each night at 3:07, but the shadow never moved fast, never trespassed, never made a direct threat. Despite this, the presence was undeniable, a suffocating attention that made sleeping impossible. Eventually, I began sleeping with my back to the window, lights dimmed, blinds closed tightly, hoping to avoid the pressure of being observed. The tapping never returned, but the shadow remained, rigid in its position, waiting for me to glance toward the window. Now, every night at 3:07, I check instinctively, and it is always there, watching, waiting, silent, unmoving, and I know it will remain outside my window long after I turn out the lights, staring at me in the darkness that belongs to my room.